But if you're reading an actual book, studies show that the long-form memory that's formed from reading in that flow state you're in is going to stay with you for a lot longer than hearing something vital on the Andrew Huberman podcast.
Dude, he doesn't even have a mustache anymore. It's a beard.
Well, it was a mustache. He just hasn't shaved
yesterday.
For about 48 hours, so it's turned into a beard.
We're all part of this whole money game. This whole...
Welcome back to another episode of Beers and Business. I'm Abe Dearmer, CEO of Appsembler.
And I'm Andrew Martin, CEO of Teamgate, and we're back, episode 10. We've got a big episode, so we had to get a very special guest for episode 10. So we're joined today by a man with a beautiful mustache. He's a military veteran, the founder and CEO of Brothers and Books.
Dude, he doesn't even have a mustache anymore. It's a beard.
Well, it was a mustache. He just hasn't shaved
yesterday.
For about 48 hours, so it's turned into a beard. But the winner of many awards as well. So I won't list them all because we'll be here forever. But going off your most recent Instagram post, I think another award may be in your future with best music video of the year. But of course, episode 10. Welcome, Mr. Dylan Conway. How's it going, mate?
Well, thanks for that great introduction, Andrew. And you're right not to mention all of the different accolades that I've racked up. And I appreciate that music videos is now one of them as well. It's a pleasure to be here today. I think what you guys are doing is absolutely great. And between you both, a massive mountain of experience with things that people often have no understanding of, but are absolutely essential to business. So well done to both of you for starting this. And I'm sure a lot of people are getting a lot of value out of it.
Just be careful because Andrew's not used to getting praise. So when you praise Andrew, it makes him feel weird and he may just shut out completely.
This podcast is usually...
Can you just throw in a few negative comments for Andrew?
So, Abe, I don't know if that's the truth. I just know that you've been his boss for a number of years and you've trained him into this thinking that it's not good for him if he receives praise.
Stockholm syndrome, right?
The bullying has a long and detailed history, Dylan.
I'm glad that immediately the spotlight is off of me and on Tomato, so let's maintain, guys.
No, spotlight directly on you. All right. First things first, though, I am drinking a passion fruit and mango hazy XPA. So for those who remember back when we did that 5 a.m. recording with Griffin, Andrew got voted to drink that hazy XPA. So now I'm on the bandwagon. Not 5 a.m. though. All right, so like always, Reckless Brewing. Embrace the haze with this juicy fruit sensation, a tasty tropical kiss loaded with mountains of fresh passion fruit, mango, and tropical hops, all wrapped up with a crisp, acidic finish that'll leave you wanting more. Smashable, crushable, utterly delectable. What more could you ask for from a beer? I do love their explanations. They're pretty top-notch.
Well read, mate. Well read. And I just want to point out that you were giving Dylan some shit before we started the recording that he was drinking ginger beer and you've pulled up with a passion fruit.
Mate, this is a hazy XPA. Hazy XPA. Anyway. It doesn't get any harder than this, mate.
Well, it does.
I might as well be drinking long neck VBs at this rate.
Anyway, once again with your mates. I got the Eddie Session XPA today. So I'll read this one out as well because, as we all know, our beer reviews are pretty average. So the froth level is always dialed to 11 when you're with your mate Eddie, the ultimate yes man, a bit like Abe. Eddie buzzes with infectious energy and is constantly chasing his next adventure. All gas, no brakes, with no time for hangovers. You're not truly living unless you've got a mate like Extreme Eddie. And I can't relate because, unlike Eddie, I'm over 30 now.
You don't have any mates.
Any hangover is a terrible hangover, but thank you again for the bullying. Hey, Dylan, what do you
colour on it? Delicious flavouring too.
We've all got orange-based cans. So this is a Matzo's OG alcoholic ginger beer from Broome, and its description says, in the scorching heat, beer was just not refreshing enough, so we created Australia's first alcoholic ginger beer. Now that's refreshing. And if Matzo's can refresh in the humidity of Broome, it can refresh anywhere. And I think that's quite good. And Sunny Coast, obviously, where Andrew's hailing from this morning.
Yeah, I sent him a photo this morning. It was -2 in Bathurst and felt like -4.
It's disgusting.
It was, it's pretty good. So I always love when I see Andrew wearing a hoodie or something like that. He's like, I got the heater on now. It's probably like 18 degrees.
I have a hoodie next to me. I took it off for the podcast, and I did just turn off the heater. So you're welcome. I'm suffering through the cold weather just like you, Abe. It's just a lot.
Yeah,
Less
I
cold.
actually just I might just spend my winters down south and then head north for the wet season, just to live on the extreme side of life. People usually do it the opposite, but just to keep myself going, you know.
But anyway, before we jump in, how's everyone going? Dylan, I know you've been a little bit sick. We've all been sick just due to the fact of having children. Well, I have been, because my kids are walking diseases. But how's everyone's week been?
Yeah, mate, you've hit it on the head. I've been copping it with gastro out of the blue, and we won't talk about it on the podcast, but that's been enlightening. The last time I had a case of gastro this bad, I was in the jungles of Malaysia, and whilst the last 4 days I've been fortunate to be in the comforts of my own home with both bathrooms meticulously clean, whilst I'm still whinging about it, I've forced myself to throw my brain back to that time period of the Malaysian jungles when I quickly ran out of toilet paper and was using the local flora to deal with
hopefully
this.
you're not using the fauna, dude.
It was a mixture. It was a mixture of both. The monkeys were everywhere, and they were pains. So that's been my last 5 days. So. But outside of that, with Brothers and Books, we've just implemented our first online volunteer course, which is completely self-paced and ran. And that was a great sort of learning adventure to figure out how to do an online course. And for anybody out there that's thinking about doing something like that, the Squarespace website provided an excellent hosting service for it. But it took us about a day from start to finish to understanding how to do it, to actually filming the content after we derived the learning objectives, to having an end state, which is a fully functional induction process for our employees / volunteers within about 12 hours. So that was a great learning for me, because now I understand that if I'm able to teach something valuable, that you can do an online course for it in the length of a day. Which, the impact is awesome because it's self-sufficient.
Yeah, nice, man. That's good. Congratulations on that. Big achievement, mate. Well done. Just making the world a better place, eh? One book at a
Short
time.
period. There we go. And we'll get more to. We're going to talk a lot about Brothers and Books later in the podcast for listeners. Probably we've probably jumped back and forth a little bit. We haven't really introduced Brothers and Books yet, but we will get to it. We promise. But until then, we may as well jump into the, as per usual, the learnings of the week and our quotes of the week. So, do you want to go first, Abe, or you want me to go first?
Yeah, fine. I'll go first. No, I'll go first because I've got two.
You seem to have a couple this week, so
yeah, I got two this week
because you don't talk enough as it is.
Exactly right. Yeah. So the first one that I've got is, I thought it was just an interesting little to understand. I know we talked about AI on the last podcast, but NVIDIA, which is the one that makes all the chips for AI and provides a lot of the hardware for those AI infrastructure so they can actually work. So they've been on an absolute tear on the stock market, if anyone hasn't been aware of that or doesn't follow the stock market. But they just had their earnings report for the last quarter, and everyone was worried that were they going to meet expectations, how are they going to go, because they had pretty lofty goals. So they made $26 billion in revenue in the last quarter, which is an astounding amount of money. That's USD. And to put it in some sort of perspective, the budget surplus for Australia in 23-24 was at 9.3 billion AUD. So that's a huge, what's that? That'd probably be like 5 billion USD, rough calculations.
A fifth.
Yeah, so it's a fifth of the revenue that NVIDIA is turning over in a quarter, which is just absolutely astounding. So to understand the scale of that organization is just huge, and everyone's relying on NVIDIA to provide these chips to allow them to run all their AI programs. So
if only you were an investor, right, Abe? If only you you were one of the many
seems like
US
a pretty
politicians.
plug there for NVIDIA.
I'm not invested in NVIDIA.
Okay.
I wish I was, I wish. Not that, the podcast reach suddenly boosts NVIDIA stocks. Mentioned on the Beers and Business podcast, and suddenly it's blowing up.
You're like Elon Musk and GameStop, maybe.
Yeah.
Dogecoin. Get a bit of Dogecoin.
But another interesting lesson that I learned the past week is, and I'm yet to find out if this is actually going to work or be useful, is I've known it's there for a while, but I've recently started looking at a discussion forum that's really relevant to Appsembler. And in there, all these people put I just installed this, I'm having this problem. How do I fix it? People get on there, give answers. So ChatGPT 4.0 has this great functionality where you can put a link inside of your, when you're talking to it, and it can go scan the link and give you an answer. So now what I'm doing is I'm putting these discussion forum posts inside of ChatGPT to then create blog posts, which are highly relevant, provide SME solutions straight from their mouth of this discussion forum. It even reads it, provide it in a blog post format, SEO optimized format. So that way you can get down to, because you mentioned before about the bottom of funnel keywords and trying to get people when they're making that buying decision, or people who are really relevant to your product, finding these relevant discussion forums, pasting in the link, getting ChatGPT to make a blog about it is yet to be proven. But what I believe is a great hack to it'll be low volume traffic, but it'll be high intent traffic coming to your site. So what we're talking about with Griffin previously. And,
yeah, nice.
To highlight that as well, if you do a search, often now you'll see Reddit come up as the top, some of the top answers for things that, how to bake a cake or how to start a non-profit charity. Dylan Conway's got his own subreddit there probably. But the thing there is that Google wants to prioritize things that answer questions and provide people with relevant answers. So if you're able to take that, optimize it for Google, provide the answer to people, because often it's hard to look through threads, I imagine that will start to knock some of those Reddit posts out as well.
It might even be worth exploring, like reposting those blogs on Reddit to answer some of those threads and seeing if you can get snippets recognized and things like that. And it's an interesting one because it's another angle to take, right? You and I have both in the past looked at like community hubs and support forums for our competitors. And I think the previous angle we took was like, how do we infiltrate and like, when these people are unhappy with their current provider, how do we get them across to our product? So yeah, a different angle in regards to.
I wonder if you could give it let's just say the Pipedrive discussion forum and say, find all negative remarks about Pipedrive inside this forum and summarize them in a dot point list.
Yeah, I'd say it could. Yeah, I think
it's
really pretty easy. It generally does it with like review sites. When you ask for blogs about top CRMs, they'll find the positives and negatives summarized from like G2 and Capterra and things like that. So I'm sure it could do it the same with a forum. Cool. Well,
Andrew, over to you. I've talked for 5 minutes now.
Mine's not as complex as Abe's 27 learnings of the week. I've just got the one. It's about the importance of being proactive versus reactive. And obviously we've talked about this before on the business side of the house. So, with customer support, getting in front of customers regularly to be proactive and reduce the risk of churn or them going to a competitor or something like that. For me, the the theme definitely crossed over into my personal life. Last week I had my final assessment for the semester for uni due, which I, as always, put back to the last possible safe moment. Well, what I thought was the last possible safe moment, thinking it was only a 3,000 word assessment. I'd get it done in 24 hours. As Abe once advised me, generally master's degrees word counts are very misleading because it requires a lot of annexes and appendices.
Oh yeah, 3,000
like
word essay is like a 20,000 word assignment.
It turned out to be 30 pages long, and it was due on the Friday, but I promised myself if I submitted on Thursday, I'd go and play some golf. So I spent an all-nighter Thursday night getting it submitted to ensure that
just to be shit at golf for an afternoon. Yeah.
And then that's why I played poorly because I was tired. So we'll put it back to that. But yeah, be proactive. Don't wait till the last minute like silly old Andrew. In all aspects, not just your uni life, but work as well. Dylan, we've given you some time.
I think that's a big thing, right? Is often we just continue to procrastinate and put things off, and it becomes a big issue. But if we just did it progressively over time, it wouldn't be such a big problem. But it's just human nature, right?
It is. It is.
If I've got a minute, it only takes a minute, right?
It's neuroscience. It's straight up. If you leave it to the last minute, it'll get done, and your body will want to put it off until that last moment. So I always trick myself with the due dates and set my alarms on my phone and my calendar app a week before anything is due, and then just refuse to look at the actual due date. And I did that all through my bachelor's degree, Mardo. But for my master's degree, I took all those lessons I learnt for my bachelor's degree, and I threw them out the window and did everything on the last day.
Yeah, it's tough. I'm pretty good at it on the business side, work day to day, and with my calendar and setting that all up. But yeah,
allegedly
need to push it across to the.
It's because you're a man of the people. You're always thinking about other people and putting yourself last.
Exactly. My business life impacts others. My personal life is just impacting me and my golf
leadership.
So there you
go. My lesson of the week, guys. I recently attended a conference with Jay Wright, and Jay Wright runs an ad agency that hosts companies such as LSKD, amongst other like apparel brands here in Australia that are huge. And something that really stood out to me is he was talking about the budgets of these businesses that a lot of young entrepreneurs and founders try to start themselves, like their own sort of clothing, wear, drop shipping, different items, is that they are spending between the organizations, but LSKD is one of the main ones, $200 million a month on ad spend. And for me, I think the lesson is that, unfortunately, a lot of these overnight startup success stories are blatantly false. And you two gentlemen might know this, but for young people out there that want to start their own business, don't just believe all of the social media hype and all the sales and all the likes and clicks, because a lot of the time that is more money being spent on those things than you can fathom. So don't always believe founders when they go, and overnight we sold X amount of products. They also spent $200 million a month on ads. So that was a lesson for the week, and a good quote of the week that I actually recently sent to Andrew.
We're jumping into quotes now. Sorry.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, mate. Jump in.
Well, do we want to talk about the lesson in marketing? Because you guys would see stuff like that all the time.
Yeah, I just want to say for LKSD, they would be getting 50% of their return on investment straight from my wife, who recently, apparently, according to her, deliveries that get delivered to my house every day, has somehow become a fitness influencer. I'm very confused.
I will admit that the only shorts that I wear for the gym are LSKD. I won't wear any other shorts because the fabric they use on their rep shorts is nice, stretchy.
Soft on you.
And when when you're a larger frame guy, you can't just, what do the kids say? The GAT, whatever it's called. When you got one of them, it makes it hard. You got to be selective.
So you know how we were reading straight from the beer can before, and Abe's just tried to do like a personal testimony about LSKD. I've just given the website a Google. Exactly what he just said is on their website about their pants. So I think he's been affected by their marketing as well.
Yeah, $200 million all here, baby.
There you go.
No, anyway, in all honesty, you got to make sure the quality's there as well. Don't get me wrong. When you're spending that amount of money, your return customers have got to be huge. Otherwise, you're not going to get that return on investment. It comes into, we talked about it previously about customer acquisition cost and net revenue retention and how it's way easier to keep a customer or get them to repurchase an item rather than go out and find new business. So quality of work there is also important. But I think the other part there about the overnight success, there's, some good stories out there about clothing brands, all sorts of different brands that started, in their garage just shipping product, and then it grew. They got their first warehouse, shipped more products, and then they made it. Like, it's just consistency over time. And, not everyone's going to make it, but you get to the stage where you can't spend $200 million a month on, ads. You're doing pretty well. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right, quote. Hit us. What do you got, Dylan?
So I just
I won't hold you back anymore, mate. Jump in.
It's not even that
You're lucky. I'll tell you what, you're lucky.
groundbreaking.
You said that you sent this to Andrew, and you're lucky they didn't steal it, because the last quote I sent to Andrew, he stole.
Come on, mate.
And now he's still rolling on with it.
Well, that's why I don't tell anybody my jokes, because they'll steal them and I'll hear them back. So this one, I just finished reading Call Sign Chaos, and I should have read this book years ago, granted, and it's been recommended to me a number of times. It's been on the page. And as I was reading all throughout his career, in a number of different wars that he was involved with, Iraq, Afghanistan, Iraq again, what he would turn to in his different positions of authority and leadership to find guidance and strategy and direction would be books. And he's got a number of famous quotes about how important reading is for leaders. But this one really stood out because he said it in jest as he came up to the second time that he was involved in Iraq. And it says, "If I needed new ideas, old books were full of them." And that obviously really resonated with me and my charity and what we do, but it's so true just how poignant old books can be in relevancy of anything that we do and any sort of unknown problem that we're facing as we move through our lives. So I thought that quote was quite good.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that a lot of people don't focus enough on how important it is to learn from other people rather than making the mistakes yourself. And the amount of time, and I feel sorry for people who are caught up, especially as here I am showing my age, but the younger generation that grow up with short reels of, TikTok and Snapchat and Facebook and Instagram and things like that, where they may not get the opportunity to get into some of those lessons that are learned from books early on in life. And I think that's a big part of, I personally, when I was growing up, I read a few biographies and things like that. But I mean, the main thing that I read was probably surrounding more fantasy style books and things like that. But there's still lessons that can be gathered from that, because someone who's older is putting that knowledge into that book, and there's life lessons that learn out of that. So it's just what you take out of it. But I feel for the people who don't get that opportunity, and I imagine that's, not to dive into what you're doing at the moment, but I imagine that's, part of the inspiration.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting you mentioned young people and not being able to get those long form sort of stories and lessons. And you guys would be aware about this, but the attention span since 2000 to now, the average attention span has gotten shorter from 18 seconds, so my attention span, average, to now just 9 seconds, so Marto's attention span. That's a loss of
9 seconds. 9 is generous.
I'm on 4.
And it's crazy. There's that old saying about memory like a goldfish. Well, our attention spans are now actually worse than goldfish. So it's crazy the impact of technology on people's brains and their focus is just ridiculous. But reading books is one way to get it back.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll jump into my quote and let Andrew finish it off. So my quote is from the great Charlie Munger. May he rest in peace. The iron rule of nature is you get what you're rewarded for. If you want ants to come, you put sugar on the floor.
You going to elaborate on that, mate?
Yeah.
So letting it sink in.
Yeah.
Letting it sink in, right? I could see your mind ticking over there, Andrew, about that.
You went more than 9 seconds. Got to keep it
4
short,
seconds
mate.
for you. So the key to that is, if you're in business and you have employees, if you reward people for the wrong thing, or you don't, I guess maybe not punish, but if you don't criticize people for doing the wrong thing, then you're going to get results that you don't want to occur or don't align with where you want the business to be. So allowing people to do half a job and not, complete it to the standard, like if you're an electrician and your team isn't cleaning up after themselves, if you let them get away with that and you don't criticize them, you're essentially, it's like a reward because they have to do less work without getting in trouble for it. And so they're going to keep going on with that behavior. if you're allowing people to, turn up late to work, or allowing people to sit on their phones instead of, if they're in a customer service role and they're sitting at a, let's just say in a brick and mortar store and they're on their phones looking at TikTok reels for 4 seconds each or 7 seconds each or whatever, you're rewarding them with that instead of saying like, hey, you need to be off that phone. You need to be talking to people, engaging with people. And you wonder why your sales are decreasing. You wonder why things aren't going the way you want in business. It's because you're rewarding these people with the wrong things. Put sugar on the floor and the ants are coming.
Yeah, and it's we like to do a lot of. Well, I work with a lot of sales companies and organizations doing sales, right? And you see it all the time with the sales reps that are generally incentivized. Most sales reps are incentivized by revenue, but if you have the company goals and the individual goals around that, and if the economy is down or those sales aren't coming in, you're just going to establish a culture of failure as well. So in the past, and I think we spoke about it on our goal setting episode, but it's really important to look at effort metrics as well. So yeah, the revenue might not be coming, but as long as you can see the effort, and you're out there doing the calls, the emails, setting the meetings, but yeah, people aren't spending the money, so the revenue's not there. But effort metrics are massive to establish that culture as well, and to be careful not to set a culture of failure. But yeah, definitely, if you're rewarding people for the wrong thing, you're going to attract those people, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we'll jump into
Andrew,
mine.
the much
Mine's not
anticipated.
serious. I think this is number 5 from Jimmy Carr in a row. We're keeping the streak alive. So my quote this week is, "It's not the pursuit of happiness; it's the happiness of the pursuit." So really, to just enjoy the process. The amount of times that we get to the end of a task and we completely switch focus and get to the next one. We see it all the time with especially entrepreneurs who are just go, 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 go. Their enjoyment is the process. So it's turning a company around or getting this company off the ground, getting it to a certain level, and then starting their next project. So yeah, that one's mine. I would say it probably wasn't applicable to my university assessment last week because that process was quite rushed and painful. But
no, you were pursuing good grades, mate.
And
we're running out of Jimmy Carr quotes. I'm getting desperate here.
And isn't it a shame that I think that's a really good point about the process wasn't fun for university because that's a real problem, I think, and we won't get into it, but I think that's a huge
I think
tragedy.
universities are broken.
In the education system, and you're not enjoying yourself the entire time. It's an absolute tragedy. It really turns people off learning. It's absolutely crazy. We all agree to send our children to school for 12 years, right? This is this and that. And then we go to university and we go, well, I'm never doing anything like that again. So we throw away the books, we get rid of it because it just ruins the learning experience.
It's why these alternative schools have started popping up around the place, which focus on being, more enjoyable, but like they charge an arm and a leg to do it, right? But the reason that they're in demand is because people want their kids to be engaged. If they're not having fun, they're not learning.
And I think it's Mark Cuban. So I do believe that if you can find a good source of education, regardless of the price, and maybe the certificate that comes with it doesn't say Harvard on it, but if it provides you value in your life, you enjoyed learning about it, it's applicable to the real world, then spend all the money you can. And that's the greatest investment you can make, right? One in yourself. And I know Mark Cuban, he's got this great saying, or it's just saying, it's not a quote or anything like that, but he's on the record as saying, I would rather take someone who has and hire someone that has read the book Rework than someone with a Harvard degree. So just reading one book as opposed to someone who's gone to Harvard and racked up $500,000 in student debt. So yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, I think it just highlights Andrew's quote, because isn't it a shame that you don't enjoy going to university? And no one I speak to does. Except for neuroscientists.
You get stuck in the process of just checking boxes, right? Like I don't mind the learning process. If I'm actually learning something and something that I can apply to my day-to-day job, great. But then some of the assessments, you think this is just not applicable to anything that I've even learned in the course. You're just going through this box.
And I think
process.
it's important to say that it often comes down to whoever the lecturer is that makes it enjoyable and knowledgeable and an excitement to be a part of. And I saw it when I did my master in marketing, as I had great people that were, instructing us, and it was awesome. And then we had people who were just like by the book, very bland. It was boring and just didn't get anything out of it. So I think it's important to acknowledge that the teachers and the lecturers in the world, they do, it's a really tough job. I would not want to be, especially like a primary school teacher, like trying to wrangle all those kids. I actually had a friend who was doing a teaching degree, went and did placement at a primary school and was like, no, he was coming home and he'd be so sick of interacting with kids, he would not want to interact with his own kid. And he's like, I just can't do this. It's not for me. And stupidly, prac for teaching degrees is like in the last year of your teaching degree. So you go through. That's how they get you the money, right? Like they get you and you're just like, screw this. I don't want to do this. Or it's like, I've already paid so much money, I've just got to commit to it now. Hopefully I enjoy it when I start full time. But, it's one of those things where you almost should have that prac up front and just say, can you actually be in a room with 27-year-old kids running an absolute muck and trying to control them all day?
It takes a certain personality type, right? It's like sales. Like a lot of people, they'll come out of college, especially in the US. It's not as big in Australia, but a lot of college kids will be like, I want to make money. I'm just going to jump into sales. And it's like sales takes a very, very specific personality to do it, especially if it's like cold calling and that sort of stuff.
I remember, Andrew, when I first got you cold calling.
Exactly.
You hated
Horrendous.
You just hated it. You was like, I hate this. You weren't like, it's not like you were bad at it. You just hated it. You're like,
I just hate bothering
stand
people.
doing this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, why do you call me all the time, mate?
But now look at him. He's a more buff Alex Hormozy character over there. So he's come a long way.
ET looking.
Oh God. All right. We've rambled on long enough. Let's jump into the next segment. We've obviously introduced Dylan. We haven't gone too much into detail because I don't want to steal too much of Dylan's thunder. But Dylan, you are the founder and CEO of Brothers and Books. So what does Brothers and Books do? How did it come about?
So our mission at Brothers and Books is to support mental health through bibliotherapy. And if you take anything away from what I say today, it is the word bibliotherapy, because I'm constantly giving speeches and having meetings with different men about town.
Are you talking about the Bible?
And they say, but bibliotherapy has been used since 1902 as a tried and proven and tested method of supporting people going through rough times. And all it is simply the practice of reading books. And as Abe mentioned earlier, it is on the decline for future generations. The beautiful thing about reading books as a way to support yourself, and we can go into the details and the practicality of it later on, is that especially for people suffering mental health, depression or anxiety or anything like that, I know in myself when I am depressed, the last thing that I want to do is get out of bed. We know that there's great things that can support us that are proven by, a number of scientists, like eating correctly, going to the gym, catching up with mates, being involved in community.
Joining the military because you get forced to get out of bed.
That's right. These are all great things to support us in our lives, and they're accessible to people, unfortunately, when they aren't in a position that these things are going to help them out the most. But the beautiful thing about books is not only is it a cost-effective approach, but it is also accessible when you're at your absolute lowest, when you are down and out. And that's actually how the charity started. So I spent 18 months in bed, being unable to walk, connected to the wall, having a total of 9 surgeries on my back. And during this time, I went from being heavily involved in my community, playing sport like boxing, touch footy and going to the gym, having a really meaningful workplace. And as I'm mentioning these things, these are the 7 sort of connections that lead to a happy life. Friends and family, lots of community around me, to having none of that. And once I had none of that, I thought that the army had prepared me to be a resilient young man. I was a young infantry officer, tough and what have you. But once all those things that made me a positive person were taken away from me, it didn't matter my frames of reference in the past. I now found myself in a situation where I was incredibly depressed. And so I spent In the first 3 months, I had about 3 surgeries. One of them was an emergency surgery, and I put on about 8 kilograms of weight. I couldn't leave the house. And one day, a book arrived at my doorstep, and it was Viktor Frankl's book, Yes to Life, which is a collection of his essays post-World War II. And Viktor Frankl...
Viktor Frankl's great. Everyone should read
should know
Viktor
Viktor Frankl's books.
Well, they should read. I doubt they do, but they should read him. He's
Man's Search
amazing.
for Meaning. It'll change your absolute life.
It's incredible.
And this book rocks up on my door, and now I look around, I wasn't doing anything else. So I said, well, I might as well read this book. I can't walk, I can't go to the toilet, I can't shower or drive, so I guess I'm reading this book. And I locked in for 4 hours, and through that book, I found that my attitude of being woe is me, feeling sorry for myself, being connected to the wall like an iPhone, all these horrible things. And I said, well, hang on a minute. This guy has been through way worse than what I'm going through. And immediately I started to be able to see the things in my life that I was grateful for. I had God at my fingertips, a mobile phone that allowed me to call any of my loved ones and communicate with them, a bed, for goodness sake, an air conditioner, because it was Townsville.
You weren't locked in a prison.
Exactly right. And there was a potential chance that what I was going through would end eventually. So I put this book down. It took about 4 hours to read. It's quite a short book. And I said, well, that's definitely changed my perspective on my current circumstance. I'm going to do more of that. And for the next about 15 months, while I still couldn't walk, I just read book after book after book. And my mindset, what I thought I had already gotten from the military, all this resilience and stoicism and bravado, I obviously had not. But books provided that to me. So when the surgeon told me the next time for the 4th surgery, hey, mate, you need another surgery on your back, I went, whatever, man, more time for reading.
I got my box of books, brother.
That's exactly right. So through reading and the perspective that stories like Victor's and many other books provided me, I was able to find myself in a situation where my external reality had no impact on my mental health and my own peace of mind. And it was a great journey. And then at the end of all of that, I said, well, why aren't more people doing this? I see all these charities, doing community connections. I've had a number of friends pass away because of mental health actions. But when they're in this situation, they don't want to go to a community event. So I looked at other charities and they're hosting barbecues and doing all this stuff. I'm not going to a barbecue when, I had my back chopped up and I'm depressed as I put on weight. I don't want to deal with that. So I thought, well, what can I do to make reading books more accessible and also promote the effect that they can have on your life? And that's how Brothers in Books was founded. And so originally we just wanted to make reading cool, and it was a big clandestine operation to get people flourishing in their own lives out instead of relying on external support mechanisms, relying on themselves, which is a pillar of resilience. And then it's grown from there. And that was about 4 years ago now. In touch wood, I had my last surgery about 18 months ago, where they just chopped off the top of my arse, and that seems to have sorted out the issue.
But now you've got an arse like Andrew.
Yeah, now
dropped that 8 kilos. That 8 kilos is gone.
came off the butt. But yeah, so that's the story of Brothers and Books and bibliotherapy and its impact on someone. But if you look into great, people of the past, and you specifically Google what books they read or were they readers, you will find that it is the same story again and again. Gandhi, Oprah, Elon, Bill Gates, Winston Churchill, all of these people are reading great books. So, it was bizarre for me to realize, why the hell didn't the education system inform me of this? And I won't take any shots at the education system because, as you said, teachers are heroes, and I wholeheartedly agree. But isn't it bizarre that similar to university and that learning process, which the majority of people dislike and are unenthused, that we are reading books like Shakespeare in our schooling system. Now, I read hundreds of books on my own volition now. None of them were Shakespeare. I've got a nice copy of Shakespeare's works, but I'm not reading it on my own volition. So why is it that we get one of the books that are the hardest to read, not even English, and give it to our kids and go, this is what reading's all about. This is Romeo and Juliet, and it's shithouse. Why not give them Man Search for Meaning. It'll be cheaper for the school board, and the children will have a perspective that when they face difficulty and hardship, and poor mental health is rife with the younger generations of today. When they're living in Australia and go, I'm facing this issue, I feel sad in my own self. They've got a frame of reference like World War II Holocaust survivors to go, well, hang on, it's not that bloody bad, and crack on with it. So,
yeah. And the first question I have, I'll start with a statement, and then the second one is a question. The first one is, I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but Swiss 8, they do a really great job. I've met those guys when I was up in Townsville. They do a really great job. And one thing that they talk about is veteran suicide, military resilience, and things like that. And they specifically call out the fact that when people lose that
sense of community,
that perception of resilience that people have, like, I'm in the military, I'm resilient, blah, blah, blah. But it's a group resilience. It's not an individual resilience. Generally, what you find is that people within that organization have really poor individual resilience because they've done everything as a team. And as soon as you pick someone up and put them as an individual, as soon as you put someone as an individual, you then start to realize, like, holy shit, I can't, where is everyone? And suddenly you're forced to face these things by yourself, and you go, wow, I'm actually not as resilient as I thought I was, which seems like something. And he's got a really good video he did that's up on the Swiss 8 page about that whole resilience factor. But the question I had was, you said the book just rocked up on your doorstep. Do you know where it came from, or was it just like, fallout? Was it an act of God? Was it Viktor Frankl, like sending guidance to you, like, this guy needs me?
So I'll answer this in two parts. Firstly, I said that for a reason, because what Brothers and Books does now is if someone's going through a hard time and one of their mates reaches out and they explain the situation to a degree, we will send a book with no notes, nothing attached to it, to that house. So it seems
this wasn't a marketing play. I literally had no idea.
So it seems, no, 100%. So it seems like an act of God, because a book rocks up, it's directed to you. What the hell is this? And I'm going through a rough time. Well, I better read this. I don't know who's given it to me. It's picked up their attention. They might text a few people, did you send me this? They'll say no. They're going to read that book. So that's one way we get people to read when they're going through rough times. But no, I do know who it came from. It came from an old mentor of mine who you may know, John Appleby, who was he was a professional dog trainer. He had a black belt in a number of martial arts. He was a young bouncer and I think like a self-made millionaire as well, but he was an avid reader, had heard about me going through an incredibly tough time and sent me that book. And there's multiple phrases within that book which are incredibly in line with exactly what I was going through at that time, to the point where I've gone back and reread the passages and been like, that was me in that time. And the beautiful thing about reading, where I say, oh my God, this is me as well. When you read a book, it does create that mindfulness to go, well, how does this relate to me in my life and my experiences? And that's very similar to what paid psychologist professionals do in their counselling sessions.
Careful, you're putting Andrew's wife out of a job here.
No, I'm not.
Andrew's like my source of income is risk here.
And she will agree that a lot of psychologists do actually outsource some learnings to books because, of course, where does modern psychology come from? Well, optimism and positive psychology didn't exist until 1992, until William Wundt, I believe, in the 1700s, created an actual division in a college for psychology. The science didn't exist. And then modern psychology only really started with Sigmund Freud and then a few other great actors in the 1900s. So this is a brand new field of science. But it stems from like 6 great books that are up for interpretation that Mardo's lovely partner would have studied at university, and they are accessible for $20. So I think, not trying to skip the middleman or anything like that, definitely reach out to psychological help. But while you were waiting to see those services, I think there are a number of great books that are going to really support your journey with that professional counselling and guidance.
Nice. And I think Abe's just quickly stepped away, which is perfect because it means I can actually ask a question without being talked over. So, Dylan, I'd love to take a step back because a lot of people now, when they jump on Brothers and Books, they'll see where your community's at. You know, now I think you're over 23,000 followers or something on Instagram last count. But when it first started, obviously that's grown to what it is now because there was a lot of buy-in, right? So originally you were serving, you know, emergency services, defense. That's just taken off even more now. But I think a really good way and how it sort of started was, and to get buy-in was, you had people submit a book of interest that they'd read and how it applied to their own personal story and, you know, the key learnings from the book and how it would apply to someone else. So straight away, people were invested because it was their own story, their own book review, and then people were engaging, you know, on if they'd experienced something similar. To fast forward now, where you're at now with local libraries through, you know, military bases, police officers around Australia. So talk me through that evolution, and I guess was that your idea to start the engagement, or
yeah? So you're a smart man. You're a smart man, and I've got a horrible product to sell, and Abe's got a marketing degree, and that horrible product is trying to convince people that reading books is cool. So I did a number of things, just like General Mattis, when I said, well, how do I get this widespread? And I looked at organizations that had the most buy-in from customers and communities. And obviously those are Meta, places like Twitter. And I go, well, what's the business model of Twitter and Facebook? Well, it's all user-generated content. So Marto picked it up on the head, and from a black box view, he's unveiled the white box there. That's exactly what we wanted to establish, to allow people to not only spread the impact of reading in the books, but to become invested in the community, to share a book and a story that's affected them, and then spread that to the community. So that is definitely how we started. And it was just through reading, I believe, a couple of Seth Godin books and having a look at other companies that did it really well.
And Abe's back now, so I'm waiting for him to jump in. But I guess
I didn't want to interrupt you, mate. Go ahead. But now I will interrupt you.
That's some good insight. And I guess, you know, those ideas, you got pretty good you got really good buy-in pretty early on. How did that then, what were the challenges then to continue the growth and to continue engagement? And I know, you know, you started doing community events, you started, you know, generating these fundraisers and growing even more from there.
Yeah, so I'll try and be as succinct and to the point as possible, but in the early days of Brothers and Books, the vision hasn't really changed. The vision has always been to get as many new people reading books as possible here in Australia, and, you know, see where we can take it wider. So that was always the vision. But then we started to become a bit innovative, and I said, okay, well, how can I make this a tangible thing? And that's where the community libraries came from. And so it was at the time I was in Townsville, the first ever veteran hub was being established, and it was being created up there by General John Caligari. And this was supposed to be a place where veterans would come, they'd seek support, they'd, you know, have all of the different things provided for them. And in the early days, and of any new initiative or infrastructure, the foot traffic's quite low, right? But I said, well, why don't we put a library in there? And in the very early days, and now they're wonderfully successful, and rightly so. It's a great building and
is
a
that
great
called
service.
Oasis?
It's the Oasis. And so I said, well, let's put a library in there. And the feedback from the staff, and it was actually opened by the Queensland Premier at the time. So Brothers and Books' first library was like snipped in front, and the library was the most beautiful sort of like backdrop. So that's where they did all the presentations and stuff. So that was good organic marketing for myself as well. But it got to the point where veterans were coming in and grabbing a book, and then like, see you guys. And that was the service they were using at the time more than anything else. So I said, well, surely or other organizations can implement this, not as like a marketing and driving foot traffic way, but to support their staff, to support the veterans they've got. So the first community libraries were all outward focused. So he wanted to support organizations that were supporting their communities to have the library as a resource. But then I thought, well, why not get organizations to utilize this as a resource internal to their company and incorporate bibliotherapy as a part of their rehabilitation program as well? Because God knows, it'll be a lot cheaper than any other sort of resource that they're utilizing to support their members get back to full health. So it's just sort of a bolt-on. But yeah, so that's how it started, and you're right. And now probably our biggest request for community libraries comes from the police service all over Australia. We have like 2 requests per week from police stations around Australia.
And one thing I'd say as well is that police are probably the most hard done by organisation that gets around, is that they have a tremendously difficult job every single day that they clock in for work, and they're probably one of the least looked after, and probably the most disrespected,
least appreciated
organisation
for sure.
that there is around. And I think that's a massive shout out there, that the work you do for them, and I can understand why they want this for some of their officers. But one thing that really, I know you mentioned bibliotherapy a lot, and it's probably the first time that a lot of people are hearing that term. And how do you communicate that effectively to people to say, hey, not so much the organisation to say, hey, you should get a library because it's great for bibliotherapy. Like, you can explain that to some, but how do you get buy-in from the actual people? Or do you find it's just the library's there, like build it and they will come sort of scenario? Is that what you find, or do you have to educate the people in those organisations?
So the way that it works is normally, and they used to be scared to put their hand up and say things and tell people about what they were doing behind closed doors, similar to you and your investment into NVIDIA. The readers, people who were reading books, weren't talking about those books. I know historically in Australia, perhaps it's not the coolest thing to do to read.
Nerd.
Right? However, readers are leaders, as you guys both know. So what we found is that the people that were reaching out to receive a community library were often people that had read hundreds of books, that were natural leaders within their sort of community and their organisation, and they were more than happy to champion the library into the process of those organisations. So I've been very fortunate that the community consists of very well-read individuals all around Australia, and you guys will know it from your military careers, whether they're officers or soldiers, doesn't matter what the rank is within a group of people, natural leaders that are constantly striving to take the initiative, inform innovative process, etc., etc. These were the people in the early days, and still today, that were reaching out to receive the community library. And I'm smiling now, I said in the early days, because I've just seen an email come through yesterday from a young soldier who said, my CEO is writing me to get this done. We want a community library. And I won't say what organisation, but that's not...
It's probably artillery, though.
that's not the person I want championing the libraries in. But what I found in the not-for-profit space, and this might segue off into something else, unfortunately, strategic communication is absolutely key, especially when you're trying to drive donations and e-commerce sales, etc., for a charity, to support the charity. It has been particularly difficult for me to message how reading can support people's lives. There are so many people that have been impacted by the power of books and the knowledge. And whether it's a psychologist or a speech or a university lecture, knowledge consumption is in some form, and reading is just another way to do that, to benefit yourself. But the strategic messaging has been really difficult. I'm biased, and Marto talked about it takes a certain person to be a salesperson. I am not a salesperson, but other organizations have found a lot of success by harping on the S word that is the worst devastating thing that can happen through mental health, and just plastering that everywhere. And you actually look behind what the charity actually does. It's not a lot. They can't show you how their philanthropic services actually support people, but that's their marketing term. And I think it's very important. And I said the S word here because if you're listening to this and, perhaps you're in a position where you want to support mental health and all that good stuff, it's actually illegal to mention the S word in media. And that is because, in journalistic standards, and that is because it drives up the rate of the F word to anybody that sees it. Now, there's a loophole with veterans that allows journalists and media to talk about it because it's a government issue and a government sector. But there's all these organizations out there that'll sell T-shirts or something and whack that word on their ads and say, we're selling T-shirts for mental health awareness. And by the way, I've never become aware of something and it solved it for me. Unfortunately, and they're not actually tangibly doing anything, but they're selling the product using this, and they're actually making it a little bit worse. And if you think back to your father's generation and the rates of suicide and the rates of that, it's very complex. But it's been rising and rising and rising. And the thing that wasn't spoken about on the daily was people's negative emotions. And once that's continuously spoken about, it becomes reality like anything. And that's why it's illegal. And so I think there's a lot of people out there really that haven't done their research. They definitely mean well, but they're going about it the wrong way just to drive donations, which is very sad for me. So it's been difficult for me to make sure I can get that strat communication without, taking that route.
Without feeling like you're a snake oil salesman, right? Like that's the biggest thing. When you actually have a good heart and are not in it to just generate profit and revenue, and you actually want to affect change, it becomes hard because you have to fight the spin. It's
difficult, and look, charities are companies, right? So perhaps this take on it, it's not beneficial to me. It's not and the charity. So I'm restricting the impact of the charity because I've decided to go a different route. But charities are companies, and perhaps me moving aside in the future will be what allows Brothers in Books to take the next level with the income coming in and the different ways that they want to market, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really interesting perspective that you have towards that. And another interesting perspective that I would love to drag out of you is that I've found that the way I consume things has changed slightly, where previously, for example, Andrew Huberman, I'm a big fan of all of his stuff, but I watch his YouTube videos and listen to his podcasts. I'm not going to pick up an Andrew Huberman book. I don't even know if he has one. I wouldn't pick it up and read it because I don't think like that at that point the content wouldn't be, similar to why people would listen to this podcast about business and not pick up a business book and read a business book and probably find out, similar or the same answers. And so what are your thoughts surrounding how we consume content and the importance of, so I'm consuming that from Andrew Huberman, but I'm also reading a book called Musashi, which is about Miyamoto Musashi, an ancient samurai, which is like, a ridiculously long book as well. But it's like the balance between those two. But I feel like the newer generation are more into that long form YouTube content. Do you have a message about consuming content and how we consume it?
So there's lots of books written about flow states and all that stuff and becoming distracted, etc. Now, you are not my target audience, Abe. I can see the traps on you already from here. So I know you're going to the gym. If you're listening to podcasts like Andrew Huberman, you're already a curious mind. You're running a podcast. You're doing all that great stuff. And you're reading as well. So that's absolutely great. Now, the risk that people run when they're trying to get into learning and self-development, if they are doing it all through that sort of long YouTube form content or anything like that, no, I think it's all good. But is that distractions that pop up, et cetera, while you're watching your phone, you look like you're just paying off people around you, et cetera. But if you're reading a book, it's crazy. I spoke to the head neuroscientist in Australia who studies the brain and reading. But if you're reading an actual book, studies show that the long-form memory that's formed from reading in that flow state you're in is going to stay with you for a lot longer than hearing something vital on the Andrew Huberman podcast. And I give speeches all the time, and the way that I show this an example is I go, I point to someone in the crowd, and it's a rough thing to do to someone. So bless the audience members. I say, list the top 3 most meaningful memories of your life, and they'll spit out there, on the spot, wedding, birth of my son.
Just the classics, right?
Can't name it, right? Yeah, so you could argue that they're just, throwing them out. And potentially they are if they thought about it critically, sure. But they struggle with the third one. And then I go, name 2 books you read in high school and point at someone else. And they go, 1984 and Brave New World. And I go, sweet, tell me what happens in 1984. They tell me what happens in 1984. Give the whole character arc and the story. What happens in Brave New World? Character arc and full story. So there is a chance with every book that you read and how the brain works with the long form memory creation and the flow state that you're in once you're actually consuming that information, that the information you read in a single book will have more of a long-lasting impact and a more memorable impact on your life than some of the most important days of your life. So I think, to answer your question, any form of learning is great. Curiosity is key, and self-development too. But reading books, there's something magical that happens. So as you do, watching videos, but also reading that books, because you'll get that stress reduction, you'll get the cortisol levels going down, you'll be less likely to face the number one killer of human beings, which is dementia later on in life, because it keeps your brain active, and you'll get all of that mindfulness and meditation state that comes with physically sitting there and reading a book as opposed to looking at a light. But I'm never going to dissuade anybody from doing learning, whatever form that takes.
Andrew, I'm going to open up for you here, mate.
There you go. I want to take a little step back. So I want to talk. Obviously, you've done really, really well in building a community, and that's really important for a non-profit. The other piece I just want you to talk on is networking, right? So I think community is massive, but networking, especially in the non-profit space where you need donations, you need to have your foot in certain doors, right? And you've done a really good job of it. Obviously, we mentioned in the intro some of the awards you've had. You're in the pocket of many politicians and high-ranking police and military people across Australia. So, talk to us about the power of networking and whether it, even just at a smaller level, getting around and getting your product in front of people. But then, as that scales, how you've done that and how it's been beneficial to the charity.
Well, I think, I've had a number of friends reach out and they go, I wish I had Dylan's ability to just, put himself out there, etc. That doesn't come easily. Like, I'm a pretty introverted guy, but and a lot of people will talk about imposter syndrome and overcoming that. And I would just say that the cure for imposter syndrome is doing the work. And as much as I despise it, I'd love to not go and give a speech in front of 1,000 people I've never met in a location I've never been to. But I do it because I know, well, this is good for the charity, but also it's good for me because once I've done that, well, then I go, it's not as bad as 1,000 people. So next time I talk to 100 people, I go, it's just 100 people. I might look
It's
like
so funny because something like that would just pump me up. I'd be like, hell yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And there's different people. So it's just all about, unfortunately taking those steps. And it's like any aspect in business, networking, doing the books, doing your strategic plan that you put off, but you've got to do it to find success, and you keep doing it and it becomes a habit. And, I talk a lot about, you talked a bit today about non-quantifiable sort of mental health stuff, but it comes back to just habit creation at the end of the day. So I think just start doing it. I've helped a number of other people start doing it as well. And it's definitely not what I set out to do. I just have a good story about losing my butt. I'm passionate about my topic, which means I know the business well. And then people are happy to support a really good mission. So maybe, your elevator pitch and stuff like that. But I don't think work on it behind the closed doors. I think just be as authentic as possible. And that really shines through. It reminds me of this story. I was at a networking event, funnily enough, with Steve Baxter, right? Steve Baxter, very famous Queensland entrepreneur, $300 million deal when he was, early 20s, putting the cabling in underneath the ocean between whatever countries. And he's gone around to different people at this networking event, and I'm just drinking tins. And that's what I mainly do at networking events, because I find often bit
of liquid courage, buddy.
Yeah. No, well, not only that, but no one really cares about what I'm doing. You've got to advocate for yourself, So if somebody really wants to help, then they'll find me. I find it's not going to be the other way around. But Steve Baxter, he's gone to all these different peoples, and I was next to my friend who's got this really great company. He's designing water filtration devices. And so maybe there's a lesson in this for networking. But I say to Steve, Steve, I'm not here to talk to you, mate. I just want a photo for my friend who couldn't make it tonight. He's a big fan. And then you've got to talk to my friend here who's actually got a really great entrepreneurial business idea. And Steve turns to my friend and he says, "What's your idea, mate?" And my friend goes, "It's shit." And Steve goes, "I bet you it's fucking good then." And so out of all of the people that Steve had spoken to tonight that were given their rehearsed 2-minute elevator pitches, he wasn't interested. The one guy that goes, has some, loses the ego, has some like mindfulness and, awareness about what he's doing and how he can improve and goes, it's shit. Steve's immediately interested because this guy's obviously shown that, hey, I can do better. I can perform more. I'm not going, this is the best product ever. Yeah, well, if it's the best product ever, why are you talking to me? You don't need seed funding. Piss off. And good luck. Yeah. Well done on your business. So
that's and it's really funny, but that's a sales psychology thing. Self-deprecating humor. You do a circuit breaker. So if you read like Never Split the Difference, they talk about all that sort of stuff. But thing is like salespeople. Well, maybe we just did a podcast, so 2 podcasts ago on sales best practices, right? But like they just get into this habit, and this is where I think you've got a really powerful play because you're so genuine and authentic. Authentic interactions are really rare in sales and building a business. So as I said, like people just put the S word everywhere and say, give us money, right? And some people will fall for that, some people won't. But in the long term, it's those genuine interactions and that ability to have those circuit breakers. And the people who do it naturally, it's amazing because salespeople get taught these horrendous tactics. Founders get taught these horrendous tactics of, you've got to have your elevator pitch ready. And they do it and they're reading off a card or it's so scripted you can tell there's no passion in it. It's just something they rehearse and you're like, get the fuck out.
Well, I had really good speaking advice given to me when I was a young man from Phil Thompson. And he won't mind me saying this because he's a phenomenal...
Big Phil.
Yeah,
I love Phil. I've been on the beers. I've been on the tins with Phil in Townsville.
So Phil is
great
a phenomenal
politician.
public speaker and he's doing so well in politics and it's great to see.
He's great.
He's a true example and mentor to many young soldiers, I'm sure, as well as a number of other people like myself. And I remember I asked him one time, how does he give speeches all the time? Because we were also on the beers in Townsville and he was going to give a speech. And I said, are you prepared? He said, yeah, I guess. I'm like, have you written anything down? He goes, I guess. Not really, no. And I go, well, how do you do that? You give like 6 speeches, every 2 days. And he goes, no, I'm going to tell you how I give the speeches. And this is a part I shouldn't say, but based off what we were doing, drinking beers, in this circumstance, perhaps his advice to me was always drink 6 beers first. And I only speak about the things that I'm...
Speech at 8 a.m. in the morning, no worries, buddy.
that I'm passionate about. And I never write anything down. And so I was like, well, this is the most experienced public speaker that I've interacted with, and this is his advice. So I took that, and 2 weeks later, might have been 3 weeks later, I was giving a speech behind, and I can't think of her name, Libby Trickett, multiple time gold medalist. And I knocked off work early because I had to give this speech, and I was right before Libby Trickett. So I'm like, okay, I had 6 hours off before it came up, and I was like, do not write anything down, Dylan. No. So do not write anything down. I'm fighting the urge to do what I've always been drummed in to do. I refused to for 6 hours, so I start getting on the drinks. And I might have had maybe 10 beers by the time my speech came up. And it was one of the best speeches I've ever given in my life. And Libby Trickett actually came up afterwards and had a go at me. Because it shat on her speech, between us. And it was because of that advice that Phil gave. And I spoke about what I cared about and what the points were that I wanted to get across. So, it's funny. Authenticity, I think, always. But unfortunately, in that not-for-profit space, you will always be the person that cares the most about your, process of supporting the people that you're trying to support, unfortunately, and you just have to live with that. And there's a famous saying: "Don't plant a seed of expectation because you'll grow disappointment." I have zero expectations about anybody else's support but mine, and that keeps me on the right track and stops me from going with my hand out to other people.
Yeah, and I think that public speaking is something that's really poorly taught and really poorly understood. Like you get taught to write out these word for word speeches and then people read it, super unauthentic. And then you just sit there and you just go, what's going on here? And I recently, one of the local business owners, she wrote a speech. She wrote it all out. And I'm like, this is rubbish. You don't want to do this. So don't write it all out. I said, just put what you've got here. It's great. I really love it all. Put it in dot points and just make sure you cover off on all those dot points. And then she's like, what? I'm going to just do that. And she trusted me. She put it in dot points, and she said it was great. It was way better than anything she could have done if she had it all read out. She absolutely crushed it. And I think it's just really, it sucks. Similar to how, people aren't reading enough, people aren't public speaking enough, because it is such a great skill and something that gets lost. And it's one of those things that you lose as well if you don't constantly do it. And I think that's where Phil Thompson's able to, get up and freewheel all the time and sound really proper, is because you do it all the time. You break down the confidence barriers, the imposter syndrome. You start to crisp up and speak in a cadence, so you don't have the ums, the ahs, and all those other bits and pieces that people throw in there. So I think for anyone that's listening, is if you're afraid of public speaking, the best thing to do is to start public speaking.
Do it.
Because you'll soon get over it.
So I'm cognizant of the time. I recently was blown away. So the dot points are a great one. Phil Thompson's advice is also great. But I was sitting at a table recently with Peter Fitzsimmons and Tony Park, two best-selling authors, and it was just like me. I had absolutely no right to be at that table. And they were explaining how they story tell. And, these are men that have written over 20 best-selling books. And their writing directly reflects into their speaking ability, and it's incredible. And Tony Park gave advice that Peter Fitzsimmons agreed with, and this is some really exceptional public speaking advice. Tony Park's advice is always start from outside in when you're telling the story. So when you get on the stage, if you really want to give us a great speech, paint the picture for the audience. That's what authors do on every single page. They'll explain the outer environment, the middle environment, the closer in environment, and then they'll start to speak on their topic, because that gets people's brains going and they start to almost be hypnotized. The second bit of advice he says that he does on every page is show, don't tell. So Tony will never use adjectives in his speech. And a good example would be Mardo slammed the cup down angrily. No. With a look of disgust on his face, he picked that cup up and threw it across the room. So you're not using those adverbs like angrily. You are showing that Mardo is angry. And Tony Park believes that if you can do that, if you're writing a book on every single page, or if you're giving a speech in every single point, then you will have a phenomenal book and an outstanding speech. That's very captivating. And I was like, oh my God, that's the best advice I've ever heard. And obviously I'm biased because I'm looking at this guy sold millions of books, but it was very simplistic, great advice. And often the best advice is.
But I would say extremely hard to execute.
Oh, yeah. And practice, right? To practice. And, that's why I've peed my pants live in front of the last 3 audiences that I've given speeches to, but I'm working on that. Forward to not do that.
And I see it all the time, especially with kids coming out of school. So I'm still involved, obviously, with the military. Everyone on this call has gone through an officer selection board. So as those kids come through, I do a lot of mentoring with them, and we put them through like fake scenarios and make them give impromptu speeches with no prep. And the amount of times you'll give him like a random silly topic on purpose. So like, tell us the best, argue for the best, vanilla's the best ice cream flavor. And they're completely gone. And then you say, all right, tell me the experience you've had with ice cream. And then they'll talk for 10 minutes and you're like, there it is. Relate it back to something you know. If you can tell a story about it, you'll be able to talk forever about it. So again, cognizant of time, I just want to ask one more question before we do start to wrap up, Dylan. So obviously you started with the community. You've started to expand it into the libraries, fundraisers and everything else. You just mentioned something about the online training with internal staff. So obviously you're starting to expand your staff. So I guess what's next? What's the plan for Brothers and Books, if you can tell us?
Yeah, so I believe that the model that we've got at the moment for Brothers and Books is quite good. We're more or less a franchise because the community libraries get plugged into different organisations. So you're taking up a lot of space on a map all over the place, which means that you're building different supporters all over. And because of that, it becomes sort of a flywheel. Whereas if those organizations that we support, instead of growing a mustache and nothing against Movember again, but I haven't tangibly seen anything that they've ever done. They've been around for a long time.
Absolutely not, right?
And they raise millions of dollars every year. And Lifeline and all those great people, they are doing amazing things, I have no doubt. But the point of difference with Brothers of Books is an organization can be like, hey, look at all these great books that we just got randomly given one day. It's over $3,000 of exceptional books, the best books that you'll ever read. And that organization said, hey, this year, well, we want to fundraise for that charity. And so if we keep doing this all over the country, and then we provide more community libraries and more fundraising, and then more community libraries and more fundraising, it becomes self-fulfilling. So I think the next step with the charity is to make sure that the processes are as lean as possible so that we can keep the flywheel tempo spinning as fast as possible. Make sure that we've got the right people so that we can keep up with the demand and the processes. And then from there, it'll just be a matter of time before there's a community library in every single organisation around Australia. Based off this, I think when I look at processes and I look at other companies, I always think, well, even with accounting, I always think, what's the simplest way to get this done with the least amount of steps? And what I've just explained to you, potentially, and maybe time will be a factor, is one way to put these community libraries all over Australia. And it'll just be a certain matter of time. So I think perhaps maybe I'll move on to something else once I'm 100% positive that Brothers and Books leadership, the team, the processes, and the programs are self-fulfilling, because then I will have worked myself out of a job, which will always be my goal and stepping into any position.
Yeah, and look, Brothers and Books will lose a titan when that happens. The work you've done, I've seen it sort of grow. I think we've been on a Zoom call once before. We're in Townsville at the same time. Didn't really have much to do with each other, but just to see the growth that's happened in Brothers and Books, I mean, for me, it's phenomenal, and it's always great to see someone doing such excellent things, and the philanthropic nature of all of it, to me, is just incredible. And absolutely want to commend you on everything you've achieved so far, and I'm sure there's still a lot more to come.
I appreciate that, Abe.
Not to focus on the sobby stuff too much. Our social media crew that follow us are rubbish at submitting questions. So I have some questions that I've actually come out of today for you. So we've mentioned before about how the lack of reading of children, young adults, is stifling, and it's potentially going to cause some longer term issues that we don't know about yet. Like, this is all new territory. If you are a parent like Andrew and I, and we want to encourage our kids to read books, have you done any sort of research, talk to people, figured out a strategy of how you would get? So I've got a 9-year-old, 7-year-old, and I mean the 2-year-old's not going to do much anyway. But for anyone who has teenagers through to probably 7-year-olds, have you developed any sort of strategy that you would say to implement as a part of that?
So the first thing that I would say to parents is that the single most determining factor of long-term wealth is reading habits. So if you want your child to be successful, then you get cunning yourself. If you need to outsource that cunning to someone like me, then I would say to look to Warren Buffett and what his father did with him as a young man to get him interested in investing. And that was set him up with some money and told him to go and learn about investing himself so that he had skin in the game. Now, if we look at children, often they're motivated by extrinsic rewards. So one thing that I'll be implementing as a parent
is... Put some sugar down, baby.
Potentially sugar, but I'll also be...
metaphorical sugar.
Paying my child per book that they read, as long as they can provide a synopsis. And the other thing that I'll be doing is setting a bedtime at, I don't know what a reasonable bedtime is, for sake of argument, let's say 6 p.m. But they're allowed to stay up until whenever they want, as long as they're reading a book. So setting the parameters in the environment and looking at what normally, elicits their reaction, which is money or different things, and then setting the parameters for them to read as many books as possible for it to become a habit, because it truly is one of the most important things that you can do. Often school just provides, and there's lots of studies into this, the best thing about school and what that provides for children is their emotional intelligence and their ability to communicate with other people, which is super important as well. But if they really want to hunker down on their education and find what they're passionate about, then you don't need to go too much further than the local library.
Yeah, and I can't remember who it was, but I remember someone who was, semi-famous, Australian famous, right? $5 per book or something like that is the going rate they had. So every time they finished a book, they get $5.
Was it Barefoot Investor?
I think it might have been Barefoot Investor, right? $5 per book or something like that. I feel like it might have been. And for me, that's incredible. The next question I have is, have you developed a reading list for kids / a reading list for the general population? So I'm listening to this, I'm like, man, I really should get into reading. I suck. Dylan has shown me the light, and Brothers and Books is now my new favorite charity. I need to get reading. Where do I start? If I'm a kid, like a young adult, or if I'm an adult, is it the same list, different lists? What are you thinking?
So it's a great question. We have a number of different reading lists online on our website that you can just simply download. If you are running an organisation, those same reading lists can also be printed out as posters. So as you guys would remember in the military where they put up those posters on the
lovely mate,
and you'd remember the different specs. Now we're encouraging organisations to put those posters up to be like, hey, best books to read on innovation. Boom, boom, boom. There's some great books on this poster. It's very colourful and cool. There's a great quote on it as well. And as they're sitting there going to the toilet, well, the next time they walk past a bookstore, they're going, I recognise that book. I've seen it on the toilet every day, so I'll pick it up. So, yeah, we got some really great reading lists online.
Not if they're on TikTok, man.
And I also encourage people to, when they find someone like Andrew Huberman, I know that they just think, well, this is a mentor of mine. This is someone I look up to. Simply Google, what are Andrew Huberman's book recommendations? So for you, Abe, that's what I recommend you do. And you'll find a big list of the books that made Andrew Huberman the person that he is today. For young children, there's a myriad of great books out there for them, but just targeted at their reading levels. And if you're coming back into reading after a long period of time off, and I do this all the time, people are like their ego straight away, just I can read. But I always go, what book should I read? I haven't read for years. I go, oh, this is a really great book, and it's quite short as well and easy to read. They go, I can read. Well, no, the habit is quite difficult. It's difficult to meditate. It's difficult to focus for long periods of time. It's a lost art. So, don't be afraid.
And then it's like, can you, buddy? Can you really read?
I don't care. I struggle to read. It's difficult. So just start with something small. But yeah, definitely have a look at who do I most admire in my life? What books are they recommending me to read? And go out and find those books, because often you'll be like, oh, it wasn't actually Elon Musk's idea. He read it in that book.
Yeah, it wasn't the UK's government idea to put cameras everywhere. That was 1984.
Yeah, that was Orwell.
Yeah.
which not many people know, but obviously George Orwell was good friends with Winston Churchill at the time. At the time, Soviet Russia and the Gulag system in their different countries was getting their citizens to spy on each other so that they could be sent away for torturing and reconditioning, and they did title, different things upside down. So
man, if people haven't read about the Gulag Archipelago, they absolutely need to.
So George Orwell's rendition of a future, dystopia is exactly what Russia was doing at the time. He's good friends with Churchill. Churchill, looked the other way. We sent thousands, if not, hundreds of thousands of Russians straight back into George Orwellian's dystopian future after they supported us in World War II. But crazy, mate, crazy if you look at that. And Animal Farm, again, still happens very much today when we change the definitions of things. I know recession recently changed. I understand in the Donald Trump trial, there was a man didn't steal from Donald Trump. He rebalanced what he thought that he was owed. It happens every day. So
Exactly. Andrew, do you have any questions for Dylan?
The only one I'll wrap up with is, are we going to see another reattempt of the world record of the longest non-break of continuous reading, which you attempted earlier in the year? Was it earlier in the year or last year?
Yeah, so this year, so it's a great question. So we attempted to read for 6 days straight out loud. We got about 4.5 days in until I fell into some sort of psychosis and thought that I was stuck in the book or stuck in a dream and I had to stop. You will not be seeing a reattempt of that. My partner, during that period, because it's quite rare for people to stay awake for 4.5 days reading out loud, if you can believe that. My partner at the time said that she's a Mensa, she's an Obi-Wan student, very intelligent young lady. She watched my IQ drop, and this is fair, to about 20, I reckon, after 4.5 days of no sleep trying to read. And because there's nowhere that she can Google to be like, if my boyfriend reads for 4.5 days out loud and is, a moron by the end of it, when he wakes up, will he cease being a moron?
Still being a moron.
There's nowhere to find that. So my poor partner, I go to sleep after 4.5 days and not.
So is he going to wake up and
and for 25 hours, I slept for 25 hours straight after that attempt.
Jesus.
And so Haley, for those 24 hours, was just on the edge. And I wake up and I was like, hey,
she's
babe.
like 2 + 2. You're like 4.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah.
And I spoke normally, and her reaction was like, "Oh, thank God." So no, I couldn't do that to my lovely partner again. But the community's response to that,
You can do it now though, because she knows that you're not going to wake up an idiot, mate. It's fine.
The community's response to that was awesome. I had people all over Australia waking up in the morning before they went to work and checking in to make sure I was still going and sending means of support. There was multiple mail group chats going on to be like, "Who's still going? Still going." So a big thanks to anybody listening that supported that. I think we raised $20,000 in 4.5 days or something. And as a charity founder, I obviously take a lot of pride in putting my body on the line as well if we're doing any fundraising. So
yeah, awesome. And I guess some great feats there, but. Where can people interact with you? Where can people find you? We'll put all this at the show notes as well, but just tell us now, where can people find you?
Yeah, so just go to brothersandbooks.com on the website and you can find everything there. And there's heaps of great free resources and you'll see all the work that we're doing as well. And but between us and the background, we've got about $300,000 worth of community libraries requested all over Australia, which would take us up to about 200 community libraries all over Australia. But that number just keeps getting bigger and bigger every day. So if you want to think about volunteering for a charity where you'll learn about graphic design, social media, marketing, CRM, and dealing with business and strategy and talking to a number of awesome people, feel free to volunteer as well, because we'll actually pay you to go out to secondhand bookstores and buy hundreds of dollars worth of books on your weekend. And I think that's a pretty great way to spend your time.
Not a bad gig.
There you go. I think of course, Brothers and Books on socials as well, right? Instagram is the big one. Yeah,
that's right. Instagram and Facebook. But the website, you've got everything there on the website.
Dylan's like us. He hasn't mastered TikTok just yet.
Yeah, no, I had a viral TikTok, but that's it. I was one and done. In and out.
One and done.
Doing better than us. All right, well... obviously Abe sprouted you with a couple of kind words. Dill, I'm a big fan. We've known each other for a long time. I've been an early adopter of Brothers and Books. I think I've got all the merch. I've used my 2-year-old son for some free marketing and some free shirts as well. So love your work, mate. And Abe, wrap us up.
Yeah, righto. Thank you, Dylan, so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it. Man, it's episode 10 for us, so it's a big milestone for us. We plan to keep doing this every week. Because Andrew and I enjoy it. Well, I probably enjoy it more than Andrew. But, just talking to people like yourself, getting that inspiration, it lights the fire. And I think that's really important for people. And talking about what we do with business day in, day out for us is really important as well. So thank you so much for coming on. I mean, this breaks up the monotony of Andrew and I talking at each other for an hour and a half. So thank you so much for coming.
Nah, guys, maintain. Hey, it's awesome to see, and I can't wait for episode 100, which no doubt is around the corner. And
we'll get you back on for episode 100, mate.
And, I'm very genuine. If anybody can do it, you too can. So maintain, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. So thanks.
Yeah, awesome. And for those listening, don't forget to like and subscribe on all your social platforms, Beers and Business Pod. Submit questions, topics, guests you want on. We're more than happy to talk about whatever you want. So as long as it's related in some way, shape or form to business, absolutely. Find us weekly, YouTube, Spotify. Tuesdays, 10 a.m. is the launch time. So tune in to the next episode 11. And cheers.
See you then. Dylan's lost his beer. Mine's empty.
Mine's empty too.
Get out of here.
So slow.